They brought her in chains. The guards were nervous, though they tried not to show it. Their armor clanked louder than it should have, powered exoskeletons humming unevenly, as if resisting the room's air. The girl walked calmly, dress swaying just below her knees, printed with red and pink flowers, so vivid they almost looked alive under the council chamber's sterile lights. Her skin was pale, her expression unreadable. No fear, no resistance. Just a steady gaze that looked past the guards and into something else. Something the assembled counselors couldn't name. 17 species were present in that high hall. 11 of them held voting power. 5 more served as observers, and one, the Empire's executor, sat above them all. They called it justice. The room called it something else entirely. The silence was not of order, but of unease. The human girl stood before them, alone. Earth's ambassador had been detained for questioning 2 cycles ago. There would be no one to speak for her. The charges, subversion, espionage, and potential planetary contamination by psychological warfare. It sounded absurd even to some of the council, but the Empire had insisted. And when the Empire insisted, no one contradicted them. She refuses to speak, one of the counselors reported, voice modulated through a translator. No confession, no request for leniency, not even a name. She's a child, another muttered. She is a weapon, said the executor. The Empire does not make mistakes. She is no child. The girl finally blinked. Not once since being brought in had she so much as flinched. Her eyes were wide, ancient in a way that didn't belong on such a young face. She looked up at the towering figure that loomed at the head of the chamber and tilted her head just slightly. I asked you, the executor growled, who sent you? Her voice, when it came, was soft. I came to see the stars. The executor stood, his carapace gleaming black under the council lights. He strode down the steps slowly, his boots echoing like judgment itself. His species had conquered 7 systems before humanity had discovered faster-than-light travel. They ruled with precision and fear. One glance from him could reduce grown diplomats to trembling fools. He circled her. Then why are you in possession of coded transmissions that our security AIs cannot decipher? I don't know what you're talking about, she said. The executor paused. And how did you escape your holding cell last night? I didn't. Security footage was wiped. Guards were unconscious. The door was still locked. But you were outside, standing, waiting, calm. I wanted fresh air. Snickers from one of the observers drew a warning glance. Even they felt the wrongness. She's mocking us, said the Thren ambassador. Let us dissect her mind. The girl smiled faintly, not at the suggestion, but at the counselor himself. That would be unwise. The executor stopped in front of her. Enough. Speak your name. A pause. Then Anya. The name rolled through the chamber like a breeze through dead leaves. One of the older ambassadors shifted in his seat. He looked at her dress. The flowers. The pale skin. He looked again. The executor signaled. A mechanical enforcer, twice her height and entirely muscle under its synthetic plating, approached from the shadows. Its hands gleamed, primed with neural disruptors. Its voice crackled. Subject, Anya. Resistance, minimal. Termination, commencing. Anya turned slightly, her eyes watching the enforcer. She didn't scream, didn't run, didn't plead. The enforcer gripped her throat and stopped. Its fingers froze, digits twitching erratically. The lights flickered. A low whine filled the room. The central hub's data interface went dark. The ventilation system ceased. Monitors flashed symbols no one recognized. One of the screens began leaking static in deep red. A single sound, barely a whisper, traveled across every surface. Mine. The enforcer dropped to its knees. Smoke hissed from its joints. It shrieked, a mechanical sound twisted by organic agony. The executor barked orders, but the systems weren't responding. The enforcer collapsed. Silence returned. Thick. Wet. Anya looked up at the executor. You touched me. He took a step back before catching himself. The entire chamber had gone dim except for the circle of light above the girl. Her dress looked brighter now. like the flowers, had opened wider. She is some kind of psychic, a counselor spat. End her now. Anya turned. Would you like to die first? The counselor choked literally, grabbing at his own throat as if the words had lodged inside his lungs. Another rose, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. The executor raised a hand. The girl was frozen again, surrounded by 10 guards. Guns aimed. Defensive systems restored. She is human, he said coldly. This is some primitive trick. Execute her now. The guards opened fire. Nothing happened. The bullets hung mid-air. Not slowed. Stopped. One dropped to the floor with a ping. Another counselor stood. This is a weapon. We must alert the fleet. The lights exploded. Darkness. In the black, only Anya's voice. She told me this would happen. Lights flickered back on. The girl was no longer restrained. She stood where the executor had just been. The executor was gone. Smoke hissed from his chair. A faint scent of burning shell. The chamber erupted into chaos. The ancient ambassador, the one who'd noticed her dress, did not move. His voice shook, but he spoke. She's not just human. You idiots. Look at her. Look. Everyone did. The red flowers on her dress had bloomed. Not metaphorically. The pattern is gone. In its place, real petals had sprouted, glistening, pulsing with some inner heartbeat. She wears the dress, he whispered. The dress of the bone, which? Superstition, someone said. But no one looked convinced. I read the Terran archives once, the ambassador said. I wanted to know why their people still whispered old stories. Stories they wouldn't digitize. Stories they burned to remember. There's one tale that survived. A woman who lives in a house with legs. Who eats the souls of the wicked. Who guards the forest with a fence made of skulls. Another screen flickered. The chamber's AI, centuries old and impervious to hacking, began playing a human lullaby. One long erased from former records. The girl looked up at the ceiling. She's coming, she said simply. Someone screamed. A diplomatic attaché began clawing at his eyes. He muttered the hut it walks, before collapsing. Guards pulled Anya back, but her feet never touched the floor. She floated. Her hair drifted like it was underwater. She told me if they ever touched me, she would come, Anya said. The chamber shook. Every station in orbit reported a new object emerging from null space. No propulsion signature. No heat. No life signs. But it moved. The satellite closest to it stopped transmitting. The next went blind. Then the orbital defense grid failed. The object was shaped like nothing the Empire recognized. It moved like it wasn't bound by physics. One moment a speck. The next miles long. And then it was outside the station. The first time they tried to dissect her mind, they used a memory extractor engineered to peel away cognition like layers of fruit skin. They'd strapped her down in a sterile white chamber deep within one of the Empire's black sites. The operator had boasted about its success rate, about how even telepods screamed within 3 seconds. Yelena didn't scream. The machine shorted out after 6. Not from overload, from feedback. She'd reversed a probe through sheer will, shattering its circuits and causing the handler's nose to bleed before he passed out cold. Afterward, they escalated. A rotating team of interrogators, all species and training backgrounds, filtered in over the next week. None could read her. Every attempt to break her failed. Her heart rate never spiked. Her breath never quickened. A few of them walked away muttering about shadows under her skin that didn't match the light. One, a Galar diplomat turned intelligence analyst, resigned on the spot. He claimed he saw someone else behind her eyes. An older woman. One with hands stained in curses and ancient fires. He didn't stop screaming until security sedated him. By the time the Admiral returned, the Empire's patience was gone. She stood over Yelena like a blade waiting to drop, her rigid posture daring the girl to defy her. You're not just human, the Admiral finally said. You're something older. Something wrong. Yelena, still cuffed to the chair, tilted her head. You finally catching on? The Admiral's silence lasted too long. Then, without warning, She motioned to her guards. Put her in cell 9. The guards hesitated. Cell 9 wasn't a prison. It was a sentence. Sealed, isolated, saturated with psi nullifiers and memory warping fields. It wasn't meant to hold prisoners. It was meant to erase them. She was led through levels of the facility never shown on maps, through corridors humming with malevolent energy. Doors closed behind her like tombstones slamming shut. But Yelena didn't resist. Not when they stripped her of her clothes and handed her the regulation gray uniform. Not when they locked her inside a room so sterile even shadows hesitated. She sat on the cot, humming a lullaby in a language no one in the galaxy had spoken for 500 years. The guards who left her there didn't return. Days passed, then weeks. Or so they thought. Time doesn't behave in cell 9. On the 16th recorded day, a technician monitoring the nullifier field began to lose teeth spontaneously. No cause. No explanation. The following morning, the field generator emitted a scream, just once, before turning off permanently. No one could repair it. The engineers refused to enter the corridor. The Admiral received the reports in grim silence. She didn't ask why the monitoring feeds were only picking up static or why every technician who worked within 3 floors of Cell 9 had requested psychiatric reassignment. She already knew. This wasn't a prisoner. This was an apex predator disguised as a girl. Yelena stood at the center of Cell 9 and opened her eyes. They hadn't tried to feed her. No food delivery schedule existed for that cell. No protocols. But she hadn't weakened. If anything, she looked healthier than when she'd been captured. Her skin glowed faintly now, as if backlit by secrets. The Admiral watched from the edge of a hologram interface 2 floors above, where one of the few functioning cameras remained. "What are you?" she whispered, not expecting an answer. Yelena looked directly into the lens. The Admiral staggered back. For a moment, she saw the old woman, the one the Galar analyst described. Tall, bent, wreathed in shadow and flame. Her hands blackened with soot and power. Eyes like bottomless forests. The Baba Yaga didn't smile. She judged. The hologram exploded. When the Empire's top psionics core attempted one final probe, they chose 5 of their elite. Veterans of mental warfields, capable of cracking minds like shell fruit. They sat in a containment room 3 kilometers from Cell 9. Linked by mind to a node meant to insulate them from blowback. 3 died instantly. The 4th went blind. Permanently. The 5th? He survived, but only physically. His mind now loops a single phrase, repeated endlessly, spoken in a child's voice. Do not knock on the witch's door. After that, they stopped trying to break her. They began preparing to kill her. Project Icarus was authorized in secret, a planet-scale weapon capable of folding matter around a quantum implosion. They called it a mercy kill. The Empire couldn't afford to let something like her exist. The risk to control, to order, was too great. The weapon required targeting her unique biofrequency, a signature they hoped they had extracted during her initial intake. But their data was corrupted. Every file related to her had scrambled. Names, dates, images. Even her DNA profile read as multiple species simultaneously. The Emperor himself overrode the AI security clearance to authorize a manual lock. It took 4 hours. When it finished, the weapon began charging. But they didn't know she'd already left Cell 9. She hadn't escaped. That would imply effort. The door simply stood open. The guard who should have been stationed outside was gone. No trace. No alert. The corridor security systems showed nothing. Except in one frame, just before static drowned the feed, a single black feather drifted across the lens. She walked through the levels, unchallenged. Not invisible, just unseen. Those she passed froze, blinked, and forgot they'd seen anyone. Until she entered the command chamber. Alarms didn't trigger. Lights didn't flicker. But every officer stopped moving, as if time had paused to let her speak. She approached the central console. The Admiral stood there, gun drawn, voice tight. "You're not supposed to be here." Yelena's reply was soft. "Neither are you." Then the lights did go out. Not from a power failure. From something older, something elemental, drawing the glow out of the room like breath from a drowning man. When the lights returned, the Admiral stood alone. Her gun missing. Her command officers gone. The console in front of her was cracked down the middle. The Icarus authorization code burned out from the screen, as if by celestial fire. She collapsed to her knees. Yelena had left behind only a message, carved into the steel floor in no known language. The linguists would spend years trying to decode it. Eventually, they'd realize it wasn't a message at all. It was a warning. Meanwhile, far from the Empire's seat of power, a smuggler ship exited a sling space rupture. Its pilot, an ex-legionnaire named Reese, had been paid to pick up cargo on the edge of known space. When he entered the rendezvous zone, he found a girl sitting on a crate, legs crossed, eyes closed. She opened them as he approached. "You're late," she said. Reese, who'd seen war, who'd seen demons walk in human skin, felt something ancient coil in his gut. But he didn't argue. "Boarding ramp's open," he said. She nodded and stepped aboard. He didn't ask who she was. Didn't need to. Everyone had heard the rumors. The Baba Yaga's daughter had returned, and she wasn't hiding anymore. In the days that followed, every ship that had ever carried cargo for the Empire received a broadcast. Audio only. A child's voice. "You hunted me. You tried to erase me. You forgot your own history. But I remember. And now you will too." The signal caused 43 AI navigators to self-terminate. Half a dozen governors resigned without explanation. Deep beneath the capital planet's crust, in a place only 13 living beings were permitted to know, a vault opened. Inside rested the remnants of the Empire's oldest enemy, the Forbidden Archive. Not weapons. Memories. History erased, rewritten, redacted. And the first entry on the newly reactivated holoslate read, "Earth, quarantine for cause. Arcane vector contamination. Lineage. Termination incomplete. On the mining world of Ortiz, laborers revolted without firing a shot. They laid down tools, walked into the jungle, and built shrines overnight. Shrines to a faceless figure with a crown of roots and feathers. When asked why, one miner replied, "Because she told us we weren't slaves." And I believed her. Imperial recon ships dispatched to investigate returned empty, crewless, floating. Only one message found aboard, carved into a bulkhead. No chains remain when the witch speaks. In the core defense ring, Admiral Syrinx of the Crothan Fleet activated a full battle alert after catching a glimpse of her walking alone on the outer hull of his command ship. No breaches, no suit, just frost footprints and silence. Syrinx suffered a stroke mid-command. Before he died, he whispered, "She stared through me. She saw my childhood sins." Medical scans showed no stroke. His brain had simply stopped. Civil unrest blossomed on every colony world with a history of oppression. Resistance movements that had been fractured for decades suddenly unified. Not through communication, through belief. They all shared dreams of a girl standing in burning forests, pointing toward stars and whispering, "Wake up." Not even the Empire's sleepwatchers, dream seers tasked with scrubbing rebellious thoughts, could touch the dreams. One tried. Her body was found outside her quarters, arms folded neatly, smile still frozen on her face. In response, the Empire deployed the Null Fleet. 70 dreadnoughts designed for absolute control. Their weapons erased molecules. Their engines destabilized quantum pathways. Each crew was trained to resist psionic, arcane, and mimetic intrusion. They were perfect. Just a signal ping looping back. You sent ghosts to kill a daughter of death. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was collapse. High lords fled their posts. Entire worlds declared neutrality. Others changed their planetary sigils to the sigil of the Black Forest, an image that hadn't existed on any database 2 weeks prior. It appeared everywhere, burned into metal, etched into mines, grown into crops. Always the same, the outline of a hut standing on chicken legs, encircled by thorns, guarded by a girl with a burning smile. On the prisoned planet Varnax, where the worst of humanity had been buried in eternal cryo, every chamber opened simultaneously. Guards were found asleep at their stations, untouched. The prisoners didn't riot. They walked out calmly and took transports that had been rerouted hours earlier. No pilots. No orders. Just coordinates. When one of the escapees was asked by planetary media where they were going, he simply replied, "To rebuild Earth." He didn't explain. He didn't need to. Because Earth was returning. Not the planet. The idea. And the Empire wasn't ready for that. Back in the capital, the Emperor himself stood in the Grand Observatory, watching a projection of the galaxy rotate in silence. He was old, older than his surgically maintained body showed. Old enough to remember the last war with Earth. Old enough to remember who'd ended it. Not soldiers. Not fleets. A woman who had stepped from the ruins and said, "No more." She hadn't fought them. She'd made them turn on each other. With words. With guilt. With truths they couldn't ignore. The Baba Yaga had made emperors weep and kings set fire to their own crowns. They buried her legend, rewrote it as fiction, scattered her name among horror stories to keep people from finding the truth. And now her daughter walked again. Not for vengeance. For balance. The emperor summoned the last living Terran historian. He asked only one question. What does she want? The historian, half mad from decades of forbidden memory storage, gave a cracked smile. She wants you to listen. To what? To the bones under your palace. The emperor dismissed him. But that night, he heard whispers in the marble floor. A lullaby in ancient Russian. It followed him to his bed, into his sleep, into the last dream he'd ever have. He never woke again. Succession was immediate and chaotic. Within 72 hours, the empire fractured. Factions blamed each other. Some tried to ally with her. Others fled toward uncharted space. One warlord attempted to weaponize faith, proclaiming himself the herald of the new witch queen. His fortress melted into blood before the week's end. Survivors reported birds speaking warnings before fire fell from the sky. The girl herself, Yelena, never gave speeches, never led armies. She simply appeared. Where injustice reigned, she walked. Where cruelty held power, it crumbled. Not because she cast spells. Not because she fought. Because those who looked at her remembered what they were supposed to be. On the distant colony of Briar's End, a child found her weeping beside a broken android. When he asked why, she answered, "It used to sing lullabies to orphans. Now it guards execution orders." She rebuilt it. With a touch, the android woke, remembered who it was, and followed her from that day forward. They called it Kashiai. When asked if that was its name, it replied, "It is now." Legend spread faster than any weapon. An imperial commander laid down her arms after seeing a field of flowers bloom in the wake of Yelena's footsteps. A fleet defected after their ships refused to lock weapons on her location. One AI-controlled world sent an encrypted message to every Empire-aligned system. The forest has returned. Yelena eventually stood at the edge of known space, where the stars grew sparse and the void pressed harder. She found what remained of Earth, scorched, poisoned, buried under centuries of imperial fear. And she sang. Not loudly, not beautifully, but with memory. The trees came first, sprouting from ash. Then the wind. Then the soil healed, grain by grain, root by root. Ruins folded into moss. Cities became gardens. And the stars shifted overhead, realigning subtly, tilting toward a place forgotten by time. People came, not to colonize, to remember. They built homes, not palaces. Told stories, not commands. Shared food, not profit. They planted huts with chicken legs on every continent. Not real ones. Symbols. Memories. Warnings. Because no matter how much peace returned, everyone knew what could rise again if needed. On the 15th anniversary of the Empire's collapse, a child born under the aurora of New Earth walked to the center of a meadow. She knelt, placed a single black feather into the grass, and whispered, "Thank you." A breeze carried her words to the stars. Far away, in a place without location, a woman in a shawl made of storm smiled and sipped tea. Yelena stood beside her. The Baba Yaga looked over, voice amused. You didn't burn it all down. I didn't need to, Yelena said. They did it themselves once they saw the truth. And the price? Yelena looked away. Still being paid. The old witch nodded. Good. Then they vanished. Not dead. Just gone. Left behind only stories. And across thousands of worlds, people lit candles in windows when night fell. Not out of fear. Out of memory. Because once, the galaxy hunted a girl. And learned why you never chase a child raised by a witch.